This is lame, man, even for you.
At its best, science fiction expresses the inherent ills of human overreach, greed, and inconsideration, as well as the optimism-stoking progress we can make technologically, morally, and socially. By playing with the contrasts between organic and synthetic, past and future, universal emotions, and idiosyncratic concepts, it's a genre that allows for existential explorations beyond the binaries of black and white. Or, I guess if all that sounds too taxing, you can blow the GDP of a small country on a Chris Pratt hairpiece and a dead-eyed animatronic peanut.
Afternoon. I'd tip my hat, but, well, it's bolted on.
This is The Electric State, a grotesque take on Simon Stalenhag's pastoral sci-fi that rips out every haunting page of its source material to use as wicks for Molotov cocktails. So, let's look at this $320 million brew of petrol and glass that seems intent on incinerating the idea of cinema as an art form.
We're now approaching the electric state, the movie of the future where nothing can possibly go wrong. Possibly go wrong? I have no idea why we keep giving the Russo brothers so much money.
After a devastating war between man and machine, which banished thousands of robots to the desert, a teenage orphan and a mechanical companion imbued with her brother's consciousness team up with a roguish smuggler on a quest into this forbidden land of forgotten technology.
Take the bot with you?
It's not a bot, it's my brother.
Whatever, kid. You want it to live? You're gonna have to trust me.
The Electric State is the latest movie shaped like a money laundering scheme from the Russo brothers, and before I really dig into why their new made-for-streaming slush fund is so foundationally rotten it constitutes an act of cultural vandalism, I think it's worth inspecting the more readily apparent surface fractures. Though there are a few striking frames that manage to render this desolate techno-exodus in a way that mirrors Stalenhag's illustrations, the VFX horsepower and artistry on display is muddied up and muted by underlit cinematography that seems indifferent or emotionally disengaged from what's being said and done on screen.
Jesse, the Earth is in danger.
What should be a sprawling graveyard of capitalistic and militaristic decay feels oddly tiny because there's very little scale or tactility to the lumbering automatons and sparking husks strewn across the landscape. Without contrast, colour, or a sense of awe, there's nothing for the underlying story or sentiment to glob onto, which renders the whole thing inert, insincere, and uncannily artificial. All of this is in service of a screenplay which, aside from a gamut of truly despicable thematic swings we'll get to soon enough, comes off like an outright rejection of originality and imagination. What Stalenhag's various works miraculously convey with negative space and startling juxtapositions between the natural world and weathered monoliths of metal and wire, the Electric State tries to approximate with the insertion of marble-mouthed platitudes, dial-a-cliché blandness, and an adherence to a formula that's so tepidly predictable it reads like they're taking the piss.
Are you trying to be a dick, or does it just come naturally to you?
Oh, that's naturally him.
Here's an exercise. Chapter skip to any scene where Millie Bobby Brown is talking. Every wooden word she says is just a repetition of information we already know.
That professor said he's never seen scores like yours.
Brute force exposition.
He's not a robot, he's a person. Chris is operating Cosmo. Although Chris doesn't know where he is, the only person that does is the doctor who gave him a sentence.
Oh, yeah.
Or simply speaking aloud what her robot companion infers with his Bumblebee from Transformers shtick.
Believe in yourself.
That's the middle of the exclusion zone.
You can do it.
This problem doesn't just affect one person. Let me show you how easily I can sum up the totality of every character in one sentence. Keats, a Han Solo type with the same arc as Han Solo. Ethan Skate, Stanley Tucci playing a villain that is precisely the same as this Stanley Tucci villain. Dr. Amherst, a rambling MacGuffin and further proof that Ke Huy Quan needs to develop some range and fire their agent.
I can't.
I think you can.
That may sound like snarky exaggeration, but in all honesty, nothing is going on behind the vacant stare of a cast that seems entirely assembled based on Instagram follower accounts and their proximity to other franchises. Everyone is playing a hollowed out variation on someone they've played before, or in the case of Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt, tap dancing along to their own typecasting.
Feels like there might be a liability.
As frictionless and predictable as all of this is, the Electric State still can't meet the bare minimum standard of these archetypical skeletons. The blank slate that is Michelle and the yep, it is just Han Solo of Keats start off proceedings bickering and riffing with desperately unfunny non sequiturs.
You're a kid.
You're a genius.
Yeah, I am.
Only to fall face first into a surrogate father-daughter rapport by the end, despite not one instance or interaction leading up to this point that earns such a relational shift. Keats stops being selfish and ornery, and Michelle stops viewing the fate of the entire world through her myopic lens because, well, there are only 20 minutes left until the credits, and this is what needs to happen right now for this movie to be one of these movies.
The world sucked. And it still does. But there are some good people in it.
There's no urgency, peril, or palpable uncertainty to anything, not even in the relatively few action sequences. That's because none of these world-conquering threats are vaguely threatening once you realise they can be instantly defeated by a kid with a paintball gun or slow-pitch Logan Roy lobbing some errant softballs at them. When things finally wrap up with a TikTok tween begging for the sweet release of death after bearing witness to the algorithmic oblivion carved out from his brain, it's telling that neither the Russo brothers nor the actors selling this slop see how emblematic this moment is of everything wrong with the Electric State. By spending more than the cumulative budgets of every Paul Thomas Anderson and Lynn Ramsey film combined on something that is built from the ground up to be watched as a second screen experience without the threat of engaging its audience in rational thought or impassioned feeling, it turns out the most relatable character here is the hairless tube kid pleading with his sister to pull the plug.
I think I need to die.
Now, all of this stuff is aesthetically unappealing and emotionally unengaging, but it's also the kind of intellectually malnourished junk that's unlikely to offend so long as you treat it like a benign, superficial time sink. However, if you pop on your peepers, focus on the margins, and try to make sense of the Electric State's attempts at subtext, inference, and allegorical meaning, this is a hellish nightmare of tone-deaf allusions and heinously awful implications.
Son of a bitch.
Whereas the Russo brothers' last two literary adaptations lived, died, and were dumped in a bleached grave on the backs of their boneheaded messaging of trauma is traumatic, drugs are addictive, and the military-industrial complex is cool, here the terrible twosome have the retro-futurist art of Simon Stalenhag and a book replete with gliding warmth and longing sadness to botch. You see, the novel on which this film is nominally based is about the seductive and destructive influence of privatization, corporate overreach, sociopathic politicization, and tech worship on how we perceive and experience culture and identity. It ponders how the complacency born of convenience and dislocation from flesh and blood connections inevitably caused the stagnation and rot of all living things in the shadows of the cold mechanical monstrosities we built to make our existence less authentically challenging. More personally, it's an interrogation of memory, nostalgia, and the ruinous hubris that leads some to believe that we can engineer people to be better on a fundamental level. This world is somber, a place where civil wars are anything but civil, children are orphaned by monetized healthcare, and identities are denounced or denied on the basis of extremist zealotry. With this blueprint for visual awe and emotional intelligence that comes complete with all the storyboards and concept art you need to translate these sobering static images to 24 frames per second of eye-widening wonder, not one iota of what I just described is realized by this rusted-over wreck of a film.
The Electric State has such beautiful source material. Simon is here tonight. Can you talk a little bit about which elements were so important to keep present in the film?
I think it was the theme of the book. The book is a really profound theme around technology.
What we have here is an antithetical adaptation, a page-to-screen act of sabotage that represents the excessive and screeching opposite of everything Stalinhag's considered and quiet work stands for.
Hands up, these boys!
The Electric State book broaches being gay in a divided America, the inexcusable cruelty of conversion therapy practices, and the regulation of bodily autonomy by governing interests from their normative standard of how things should be. In a brazen act of full lobotomy, dumbing down, and LGBTQIA+ erasure, the film of the Electric State deletes all of this and doesn't bother replacing it with anything.
If you can tell a story in a more compressed fashion, then it's going to be a better story. Yeah. And so, we were just tough on the material.
The novel's technology addiction and rampant consumerism have shuddering echoes of the opioid epidemic, where folks have unknowingly been made deathly dependent on something meant to facilitate their everyday lives by a cabal of profiteering conglomerates who have eschewed regulatory measures and cashed in on misery. The movie sweeps all that uncomfortable shit under the rug, pulling a cynical 180 that tries to argue that actually social progress, technological oversight, and the regulation of commercial products is tyranny, and that the most authentic declaration of freedom one can make is to applaud the automation of art and commerce and remain steadfast and loyal to brands, corporate mascots, and recycled intellectual property.
These things couldn't be less sophisticated, and that is their charm and their fun and their virtue, is their basicness.
Don't ask questions, just consume product and then get excited for next products.
Sure, we could have made a lyrical masterpiece off the back of this image alone, but instead we're going to throw that out so we can have a Dr. Pepper can serve as a critical plot clue.
Doctor.
And an aching monologue about how one of the worst parts of the Holocaust is that Panda Express isn't a thing anymore.
Got fortune cookies, General Tso's chicken, orange chicken, chicken fried rice, pork fried dumplings, all that stuff. It just doesn't go bad.
The Russo brothers' empty emulation of Stalinhag's visual concepts doesn't just toss out every smart and thoughtful idea he had, they actually present his imagery in a way that's just incorrect.
Complete system failure.
Holy shit.
Take these headsets, which can be used to engage with immersive virtual reality or pilot drone bodies. Consider how that would change our relationship with reality, and the unbelievable benefit it would have for those with neurological and physical disabilities by equitably returning access to realms of expression and movement they may have otherwise been denied. Now, think of the disassociative risk of being able to cognitively retreat into the recesses of artifice and unreality. Stalinhag's material in and beyond the electric state broaches these transhumanistic considerations tactfully and thoughtfully, but never forcefully. So, what do the Russo brothers do with this? They treat it like a jerk-off device for George Costanza, and that's about it.
My frontal cortex is in Vegas with Cindy Crawford. I'm not missing that for you.
Which is such an infantile failure of imagination that the only way you can justify it is as a malicious dumbing down that holds its audience in contempt.
How shall I put this? Who cares? Who cares?
Despite all this nonsense, somehow these examples aren't even the worst of it. For that, we need to wade into how the electric state contends with race, immigration, and human rights, with such shit-the-bed ineptitude that the Russos' supposed good intentions may as well be dog-whistling pleas of, "I'm not racist because I have a black housekeeper." In this film, the revolutionary robots represent persons of colour, Indigenous Americans, and immigrants. So, from minute one, the Russos are literally dehumanizing and objectifying the very group they intend to elevate allegorically.
We deserve the right to liberty, deserve freedom from servitude.
They deserve the right to work for me when I plug them in, and when they don't, it's off to the garbage.
By building a premise around the idea that white people are people, everyone else is a tool we should take better care of, they're not even pretending to flesh out any of these non-human folks. They're saying that their stand-ins for marginalized groups should be defined entirely by their labor and how they can be used to benefit the all-American white-bread heroes. The implication here isn't that we should ensure the equitable treatment of all. Instead, it's arguing that we need cheap and expendable workers because it'll make the lives of people like this much more straightforward.
I hate it.
It is so othering, poorly thought out, and crass that their underground railroad is a gaggle of comic relief, and, I'm not making this up, their direct analogue for Harriet Tubman is a monocle-wearing peanut.
I signed that peace treaty because it recognized robots as a people. I don't guess you'd know what it's like to have your very right to exist depend on a piece of paper.
Flawless victory.
Even when their points become more pointedly modern, their equivalent of the shameful conduct of immigration customs enforcement only extends so far as tossing out the question, what if Chappie had a hard-on for smashing home appliances? The premise starts faulty and only gets more disgusting as it goes along, until this may as well be Detroit Become Human for people who rub their junk on their Funko Pop collections.
Did you know Detroit was on the Underground Railroad?
The robot rights movement gathered steam today as thousands of robots descended on St. Louis to listen to a fiery speech made by former Planters promotional bot, Mr. Peanut.
In 2020, Amazon Prime released a mini-series adaptation of Simon Stalenhag's Tales from the Loop, without much promotion or fanfare. It's meditative, moving, and glacially patient, allowing the world and its inhabitants to feel alive and for these scuffed-up machines to stride between trees and tower amongst the birds.
This place, it tells how long your life will be.
Hello?
That's good. You're gonna have a long life.
Images like this have more raw beauty than you'll find in all 2 hours and change of this. 2023's The Creator is an eye-watering ode to Stalenhag's pastoral sci-fi that aesthetically synthesizes the same ashen blend of disillusionment, hope, and the pitfalls and possibilities of progress that is only let down by a pace and plot that never comes close to matching its oral and visual glory.
Targets! Targets, run! Nee! We hadden hem.
Now, just remember that this was made with prosumer-grade equipment for less than a quarter of what this cost to squirt out. $80 million? Over $320 million.
Stay calm. Scavs are still machines. They're rational.
The Electric State isn't an adaptation of the book of the same name. It's an aberration and abuse of authorial intent that could not be less thematically, narratively, or emotionally faithful. The only way you could be more egregiously disrespectful is if you released Meet the Spartans and claimed it was based on the writings of Malcolm X.
Boner alert! Boner alert!
Much has been made of how, at $320 million before marketing, this digital afterbirth cost more than if you were to add together A24's entire operating budget for 2024 and all 10 of my favourite features of that year. Not only is it infuriating, wasteful, and impossible to justify without thinking a forensic accountant should probably start looking at why this had 30 credited producers on the payroll, but there's no way to argue that the money found its way onto the screen.
Any questions? What does this monstrosity cost?
Jerry, what's the sticker price?
I'm ruined!
Forget for a second how stupid, poorly acted, terribly structured, and thematically hideous this is, and ask yourself, does this pilfered production design, no charisma star power, repugnant script, and CGI smear equal the value of 64 Moons, 32 The Brutalists, 5 Matrixes, 4.5 Saving Private Ryans, or 2 Blade Runner 2049s?
No, 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 no. No, no, no. No, 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 no.
The Electric State wants to sing in the same key as any number of Spielbergian classics, but feels like an atonal medley of Ready Player One and Mac and Me. It takes something beautiful, curb stomps it, then spends the remaining runtime licking the boot of the very no attention span consumerist culture it's supposed to admonish. The Russo brothers and the Electric State don't mark the death of cinema, nor does their gluttonous price-gouging grift mean art has been entirely consumed by commerce. It just means we should all throw some time and money at works that matter, and patiently pray for the day this moronic money-torching machine burns itself to the ground.
End of the line.
Hey!
An Iron Giant weeping session for our Patreon producers Jennifer C, Claire MD, Becky O, Jennifer Fetish, Reed Stoven, CC Sings, George Napper, Arden Hughes, John Hughes, Samantha Hughes, Tara O'Connell, and Nicholas Lair Revere. And this film was an absolute state for all these amazing folks who support us over on Patreon. So have you read anything or experienced the art of Simon Stalenhag? What did you make of the Electric State? And do you think the Russo brothers have completely lost any spark they may or may not have had? The best way to support the channel is to leave a comment down below, like, subscribe and share with a friend, and if you're in a position to do so, feel free to check out our Patreon at the link in the description below. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, this is Infrim out.